Okay, Kjetil, so thank you very much to be with us. What about you describe us the situation in Norway about precision medicine and molecular testing, please?
So we built a precision cancer medicine initiative for Norway starting in 2019 with an analysis of what needed to happen in order to build a national or get going basically with something beyond individual molecular tests and very small trials. And we found that we needed to build molecular diagnostics, get started with big gene panels. We needed to recruit clinical trials, and we needed to work in parallel to get things over into ordinary clinical practice. And, part of this was also building the competence that we needed. Basically, what happened was that we had buy-in from the oncology environment, from the pathology environment in Norway, and the hematology environment on a national arena, that they wanted to be involved in building a national initiative. And then we said this cannot be about profiling individual scientists or profiling individual institutions. We're going to have to work together, and also that we're going to have a few common priorities in order to convince the authorities that they should pay for it. So the second thing that sort of happened in Norway was we had a ministry, the Minister for Health, that wanted precision medicine to happen. He was concerned that patients would not get into clinical trials if we didn't have the molecular diagnostics, but pouring money on this didn't solve the problem because it needed to be operationally organized. So that's what the bottom-up initiative provided. We provided a way to organize it. We had a very good dialogue with the regional healthcare authorities and the ministry, and it released a lot of funding. First to build a national initiative for the diagnostics and the infrastructure, and then through the National Clinical Trials Program where we had to apply, but there was a dedicated call for a big national trial. We released funding for the Impress Norway trials. That was a little bit how we got started in Norway. We also then did international scoping. We connected to the DRUP trial and other trials that were starting in parallel in the other Nordic countries. And we started talking to industry also right away. We built a public-private partnership. And in the context of that, we negotiated also then gradually drugs into the Impress trial as we sort of started the protocol. Okay. And part of this is also that we, in addition to the hump costs, we got the Norwegian healthcare system to pay for big gene panels for in the infrastructure for precision diagnostics in Norway, so that we could stratify patients into clinical trials. So the diagnostics was defined as healthcare, whereas the trial is research.
Okay, large work. Impressive. So is this strategy implemented in all the hospitals in the country, or is it centralized? How do you organize things?
The division of labor for the diagnostics is such that the big gene panels should run at all the 6 university hospitals in Norway. They're all publicly funded hospitals. 2 centers, Oslo and Bergen, should have whole genome sequencing. And then every other hospital that has pathology should also be able to do molecular diagnostics for small gene panels, etc. There is a competence network where they work together to build competence and sort of enable people to do that. And that's worked very nicely, actually. There hasn't been a lot of competition around this, and so that's worked well. Okay. For the Impress trial, we opened the trial at every hospital in Norway that treats cancer patients. So we have 17 hospital trusts and 23 sites, hospitals that are in the trial and treat patients.
Okay. So there is this step between molecular analysis and having a compound which is in the molecular tumor board. So are there a unique molecular tumor board, or is it spread in the country? How do you work?
So when we released funding for national infrastructure for precision cancer diagnostics, the regional healthcare systems in Norway also said that they would like to have a national molecular tumor board to set standards. And they asked Oslo University Hospital as the biggest hospital to organize that, and it's set up with a molecular pathologist, Hege Rusnes, who's in the PCM for EU project also, and Tormod Guren, who's also in that project, an oncologist. They're in charge of running the tumor board, and up to now it's been national. It's been running with all the university hospitals, and there are 2 meetings every week, one for the diagnosticians and the doctors that work with the IMPRESS trial, etc. And they figure out what do they need to investigate, and then there is a meeting with the referring oncologists where they also get the results back. And this is normally one slide where everything's packed into one slide that also goes in the pathology report. And this runs on a virtual net in Norway called Norwegian Health Net, and patients are anonymized, and all the hospitals that are part of the trial or the diagnostic infrastructure can call in. So it can be 40, 50, maybe even 60 people on the video call to follow this and learn, etc. There's been a lot of interest in the competence building around this initiative. As this scales now, we're going to have to go regional. Each university hospital runs regional molecular tumor board for their referring hospitals, basically, and then we're going to have a mechanism to standardize the decision making, etc.
What was the story about the DRUP trial that you implemented in Norway, called the IMPRESS trial, in terms of what was your inspiration? How could you collaborate between countries? And then I'll have other question about how do you get some compounds to put in the trial?
So when we developed the national initiative, we did international scoping to see what other bigger precision medicines trials were running in Europe and which ones had been successful, how were they organized. And then we found in 2019, when the DRUP trial reported, that they had the highest inclusion rate that had been sort of reported to date, and also the highest clinical benefit. They had almost 50% inclusion rate, and they had 1/3 of the patients had clinical benefit according to the definition in the trial. The other 2 factors that made us look at the DRUP-like model was that they were very willing to share information. They shared their protocol, they shared a lot of other information. They wanted to help others to get started. And we also learned that the other Nordic countries were planning similar trials at the time. So, and the Nordic countries collaborated a lot, so that's was a good basis for that we would also make a similar trial. And then we already talked about the funding that was raised through the National Clinical Trials Program. And then we started talking to industry partners, and we basically talked to almost 20 industry partners in the first round. And we asked them would they fund or be interested in being involved and provide drugs for a trial like the one in the Netherlands. We developed the argumentation, proved that the cost, etc. And we had Roche come on board first with 8 drugs. They also provided a project with Foundation Medicine where they would do ctDNA testing in parallel with our nationally funded reimbursed big gene panel testing. So that worked very well with Roche. And then we just started, that was also the recommendation of Emil Fost in DRUP, that if we had a few drugs, they also started when they had 7 drugs. Then Novartis came on board, they provided 4 drugs. Then we had Insight coming on board and AstraZeneca, and there are more companies coming in. So now we're at 23 drugs, and we have more drugs coming in this year, I hope. At least that's what it looks like.
We hope to. So what, in this discussion with the pharma, what are the things that convince the pharma to provide the compounds for the IMPRESS trial? What are the things that you feel are potential caveats or obstacles? What is your feedback from this?
I think that when we started, we asked, could we have the same conditions as the DRUP trial? We could open the cohorts exactly that we wanted, based on what we found. I think Roche went for something like that, and then we went back to all the other companies. We asked if they didn't want to do that, could we somehow in the drug-specific amendment for each drug that will run under the protocol, could we negotiate what cancers would they be interested in investigating, what molecular markers would they be interested in looking at, and could we limit the scope a little bit and then make it interesting for each company. So we've had that type of specialized discussions, and we've sort of found a way for a number of drugs to sort of fit with the needs and interests of the pharma company also. Then another important aspect has been to clarify with the industry partner that we are not going to do research that has already been done, and we are not going to duplicate research that is being done currently with other countries. So we set up a memorandum of understanding with DRUP and with the other Nordic trials that we would inform each other about cohorts where there was a negative result. So we wouldn't be treating patients with things that we could learn from the other trials that is not working. And secondly, that we would coordinate the filling of cohorts so that we would, be as effective as possible together. I think those two aspects were important, that we document that we want basically the same as the industry partners will want also. And then this has been further developed in the context of these EU projects that are now going to start.
Yeah, so that was my next question. So in PCM4U and Primrose that you're coordinating, there is this aim to build international cohorts. So you have a DRUP trial cohorts, one biomarker, one or several tumor types, and one treatment that could recruit patients in different countries. So do you have already some experience of transborder or multiple countries contributing to one DRUP trial cohort? And what is the plan? How would we implement that?
There is the successful DRUP cohort of 24 patients, stage 1 and 2, on olaparib, where they show that if there is a biallelic inactivation of BRCA1 or BRCA2, that PARP inhibitors would be effective pan-cancer, also going beyond ovarian cancer, prostate cancer, and breast cancer, where you may require only one hit on a BRCA gene. And there, the DRUP trial have invited other trials to join an expansion cohort, which will basically be like a single-arm phase 2 trial going and recruiting more patients. Norway, together with Netherlands, are the first two countries to join that cohort, and we expect that there will be other trials also joining that cohort, because that will be one of the cohorts in the Primrose project, the way it looks now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there is clearly a question of data sharing. So as soon as it is an academic initiative, so it's trials that are developed by the academy, hospitals. How do you manage data sharing? How is the data from the trial recorded, and who do the final analysis?
So the motivation for the Primrose project is that with the trial design in DRUP and the other trials in Europe that have a similar design, we end up with a lot of open cohorts that are defined both by the organ-specific diagnosis, the biomarker, and the drug that we decide to treat the patient with. And we've opened many cohorts, and we may later merge some of them, but we still end up with a lot of such combinations being quite rare, and that cohorts and the building of the documentation and knowledge bases to do health economic assessments for implementation of ordinary practice takes a long time. And the other solution to that is to see, can we aggregate data between the trials? And with the DRUP trial and similar trials running in different countries, and where the endpoints in the trials are very well aligned, there is a good basis to aggregate data. And that's the main sort of objective of the Primrose project. Can we organize this in a way where we build a data aggregation platform? That's going to be in work package 1 of the Primrose project. And can we then first aggregate the clinical endpoint data to really coordinate those, have them in the same place, curate the data, etc., and also control the data in work package 2 versus different types of control cohorts that will be built synthetically with statistical methods, either from sequence patients, from multiple draws from national cancer registries, or from cohorts in IMPRESS that do not get treatment but are consented. And together, that data in work package 1 and 2 of Primrose will allow us to do decisions as to what findings are there that are particularly important and interesting to further investigate further. And then there is money in the project to fund what's called additional expansion cohorts to build further evidence and probe further to see, can we actually document that a particular treatment is effective with the joint cohorts.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So the final goal, I think, is to have a reimbursement, sufficient proof to have the reimbursement of a compound in a specific molecular situation for specific tumor types. We have seen this successful for DRUP trial with nivolumab reimbursed for MSI-high pan-tumor. So do you think with Primrose, PCM4U, we can envision country-wise, multiple countries approving a compound based on these or the results of some cohorts?
In Primrose, in addition to what I already said, there is also an exercise to see, can we collect further data from off-label use? And there is a work package that's dedicated to assessing what are the health economic sides of this, how good is the evidence, and also to find out and match this to decision criteria for reimbursement in different countries. And then there's also a big activity on stakeholder involvement, bringing in additional competencies like regulatory competence, etc., to see how can we work with a publicly funded initiative like this to see can we actually provide the documentation that will allow expansion of labels to rarer cancers, for example, where the financial incentives for the industry are not really there, for example. That will benefit patients.
Yeah. Okay, great. So looking forward to start this big project and hopefully having such result at the end. So thanks a lot, Kjetil, for your sharing. A lot of insights from you today, and I hope this will help the community to come on board and participate to this effort.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about Primrose, and I look forward to working together with all the 24 partners and all the number of people with different competences that will be involved in the project. I think that will be great fun.
Yeah, thank you.